Life number 1, Atlantis. The sun's rays were streaming through the tall pillars of the great white temple as Kalon, the high priest, made his way to the lion gardens where Tula, his favorite lioness, was about to give birth to a cub. Kalon knew the exact hour when the cub would be born, for he had worked it all out from the stars. He also knew that this cub would be a rather special little person, but then Kalon was a very wise high priest, which was as things ought to be. Tula and her mate, Rayan, lived in a beautiful park beside the vast temple. Every day when they took a walk with Kalon, one of the humans mentioned by Timbal who, because he had once lived on the crystal planet, could understand the language of all creatures. But, of course, in those days before the Great Flood, a lot of the humans were much closer and kinder to nature than they are today. As Kalon entered the enclosure where Tula was resting, he knew her time was near. So he asked the young priest who looked after the lions to take Rayan to another part of the enclosure, for he knew the great beast might be distressed if he heard his mate cry out. But Tula made no sound when her cub was born, and after she had washed her baby, she allowed Kalon and Rayan to take a look, but only a quick one, as her low growl soon told them when it was time to leave her and her little one to rest. Kalon sat down quietly with his wife, Danu, who was a beautiful priestess, and together they talked mind to mind to Rayan about what they should call the new little lioness. "She must have brought a name with her from her native planet," said Danu, who knew about such things. "Then who better to tell us than Rayan, who must surely have come from the same place?" Kalon exclaimed. So they asked Rayan, who thought long and hard before responding. "Her name is Tayo." "Is that a male or female name?" Danu asked. "Does it really matter?" Rayan replied. "After all, if it was very personal to her on the Pascha planet, surely it can be used either way here, as it is not a name that anyone else has." They all agreed, so Tayo she was named. At first Tayo found it was very strange running around on all fours, although, of course, she didn't quite know why, but she soon got used to it. "When you are older," Tula told her, "you will receive a beautiful present from Kalon, just as your father and I have." She rubbed her strong neck against the silver collar that she wore around it. It was bright and shiny and studded with blue stones that sparkled in the sunlight, and it reminded Tayo of something that she couldn't quite remember. Tayo loved her mother's collar, for to her it was a living thing. At night, before she went to sleep, Tayo would talk to the blue stones and ask them how long it would be before she could have a friend like Kalon all to herself. One day, Tayo's parents decided she was old enough to meet more of Kalon's people. "We could not take you with us before," her father told her, "for young lionesses must pay heed to what they are told and not make loud noises when everyone else is quiet. Also, they must learn that if they are to have a human friend like Kalon, they must return love for love and service for service. If you work for a priest or priestess, you will be loved, fed, and kept well in mind and body. You, in turn, must learn to read his or her mind and know what certain sounds mean. You must also drive away anything visible or invisible that might cause harm to those who care for you. In time you will sit at the judgment seat, but such things are for the priest to teach you as you grow up." Rayan swished his great mane with an air of distinction, and Tayo thought to herself how lucky she was to have such a beautiful and wise father. Of course, she had not the slightest idea what he was talking about, but, as we shall see, she was soon to learn. Rayan did not wear a collar like Tula, but he had a solid gold band around his left leg with his own name and Calonne's engraved upon it. The days were happy ones for a baby lioness. Once a week her father and mother would go to the great white temple to sit by the judgment seat with Calonne and help him to make the right decisions about the people who came there for a hearing. This is because felines can see things that humans do not see, and although they may not speak our language, they have their own ways of making their message known, as we shall shortly see. One day, Tayo's father told her that it was time for her to be taken to the big temple to watch them make judgments together. "You must also learn how to do this, my daughter," said Rayan. "Although you are still only a little lioness, you have brought a lot of wisdom over with you from Pasha land, but it needs to be trained for temple service on this planet." Tayo was quite excited about this, of course, although she had to confess that she was also a little nervous. After all, it was a very big temple. It was quite early in the morning, and the day was obviously going to be a hot one. A faint mist rose from the many canals of the capital as the three lions set out with Calonne and his family towards the great temple where the judgments were to be heard. Calonne went first across the blue-tiled courtyard, up the long flight of white steps that glistened in the clear early sunlight, through the marbled lobby and down the center aisle towards the chair of judgment, which stood on a huge, shining dais. Danu followed behind him with their young son, whose name was Helio, and finally came the three lions, one large, stately, and magnificent, one sleek, shiny, and beautiful, and one small, downy, and clumsy. Tayo made her way towards the spot that her father indicated, trying very hard to be quiet as possible, but the claws on her little paws seemed to make such loud noises on the floor, and when she tried to make velvet, as she had been taught, she kept skidding on the polished marble. In spite of all her efforts to be as silent as possible, she found herself letting out a monstrously loud purr, which seemed to amuse Helio, who started to giggle. After they had all settled down, one of the attendants brought in the first case. It was a rather strange-looking man, dirty and unkempt. He was clutching something in his hands that sparkled, and which he held on to very tightly as though he were afraid that someone would take it away from him. There was a look of fear in his eyes, and Tayo didn't like his scent at all. In fact, she growled quietly to herself, but her mother nipped her gently so that she should not give Calonne the wrong impression. This puzzled the little lioness, for she didn't think the man was at all nice. Calonne asked the scribe to read the charge. "This man," he said, "who cannot remember his name, had stolen this bracelet from an honest woman's dwelling, and he will not return it. He says that it is his, but the woman has proof that it is her property." "Why do you wish to own this trinket?" Calonne asked the man, who trembled and fondled the bracelet before answering. "It is the color, my lord. It takes the pain from my head." "That I can well understand," Calonne replied. "You are indeed sick and in need of the silver ray to bring you relief. Come, give it back to the lady, and I will give you something to take its place." He beckoned to a young priestess in a green robe standing nearby, who presented him with a tray that was laden with many sparkling objects. Cologne selected a bright silver chain, which he handed to the man. "You must wear this while our healers attend to your sickness and make you well again." The man fell upon his knees and clasped the chain gratefully to his breast. "Thank you, my lord," he whispered gratefully. Tayo saw a big tear splash on the shiny floor where he knelt, and she was so sorry that she had growled when she shouldn't have. "So shall it be according to the wisdom and understanding of the old ones," answered Cologne. As he spoke, he raised his hands and made a sign over the man, who was then escorted away by a gentle healer priestess. As Cologne made the sign, Tayo noticed a stream of silver light leave his hands and enter the man. Once again, Tayo half remembered something, but she wasn't quite sure what. Rayen then explained to his daughter, "When people come for judgment, do not look at them on the outside only, or pay too much heed to the smells or sounds that come from them, but look rather at the aura around them." "What is an aura?" Tayo inquired. "It is a light that surrounds all living things," said Rayen. "As everything is alive, that means that everything has an aura. Auras come in many colors, shapes, and sizes, and when they are bright and clear, that is good. But anyone who has an aura which is dark or cloudy or broken may well make strange noises, smell badly, or not look quite right. This means that they are sick and should be helped by the healer priests, so you must not growl at such persons, my daughter." Tayo wanted very much to see an aura, so she stole a quick glance at Cologne. She wasn't too sure whether she was imagining things, so she looked again, this time much harder, and, sure enough, there was a beautiful blue light edged with gold all around him. Of course, after that she simply had to take another hard look, this time at the priestess, whose aura was a sort of silvery crystal color, and then Tayo understood. After that, Cologne asked Tayo to sit at the back for a while and watch how her parents worked with him while he heard the next few cases, so there she sat quietly and very patiently, watching everything that went on and trying very hard to take in as much as she could. But when it came to the last case of the day, Tayo had the surprise of her life when Cologne beckoned her to come forward. "Now it is your turn to let us see what you have learned, little one," said the kindly high priest. Tayo tried to look as important as she could, which meant sitting up very straight like her parents did, but somehow it didn't quite work out, for she got an itch on her tummy and kept falling over each time she tried to scratch it, although no one seemed to worry, so neither did she. The first man to enter did not look at all bad. He was dressed nicely and seemed to do all the right things, like giving the lions a friendly smile and bowing most humbly before Cologne. He was followed close behind by a very young priest who obviously hadn't been in office very long and who seemed rather unsure of himself. Cologne asked for an account of the case, and the scribe read as follows. "This young priest, whose name is Indrist, was left in charge of the temple in the small town of Carcris while his superior was away at the capital attending to matters of state. Indrist claims that during this period he caught Talus, the merchant who stands before us, trying to steal secrets which are allowed only to those of high office from the chamber of the senior priest. These he thought to make his own to gain power over his fellow men." "Come, Indris," Cologne addressed the young priest, "and tell us of these things." The young man seemed very shy, and his voice was unsteady. Tayo found herself feeling a little suspicious until she suddenly noticed her mother leaning towards him with love and warmth glistening in her fine eyes. Indris spoke very softly. "My lord, it was late in the evening, and I noticed light from within the temple offices. I entered and found this man, Talus, in the private chamber of my superior, copying from a large book, the sight of which is forbidden to all but those of our order. I told him that what he was doing was wrong, and he replied that if I would say nothing of this to anyone and forget the matter, he would shower me with many gifts. Naturally, I refused. Then he insisted that he himself should have been a priest, and therefore the knowledge was rightly his, but due to a misjudgment, he was never accepted for the priestly office. When I made my path of duty quite clear to him, he threatened me with evil words, saying I was sick in my mind and had imagined what I had seen. Many people in our city believe his words and feel that I have wronged a good man and am therefore unworthy of my calling." "And you, Talus, how do you answer to this?" Cologne asked, addressing the older man. The merchant seemed very confident and sincere in his reply. "My lord, I approached the temple that evening to speak with Indris and my daughter, for this young man would court her if I were to permit it. But because I am not too happy about his character, I have held back my consent, and the reason for my visit was to tell him that my word on this matter was final. He said he would not accept this and would blacken my good name with evil lies unless I changed my mind." "It is untrue, my lord," gasped Indris. But the merchant ignored the interruption and continued. "I am sorry for the boy, for he is young and sick, no doubt. So I ask you to judge him kindly, and I will forgive and forget." Tayo was quite puzzled by now. At first she had felt sorry for the young priest and then the older man who seemed so nice, so she turned to her father and mother for help. Cologne spoke to Indris. "Is it true that you would court the daughter of this merchant?" Indris hung his head and answered slowly, "Yes, my lord." There was a pause before Cologne spoke again. "Then stand forth, priest." He indicated a spot in front of him. "And do you still hold that your story is the truth?" Poor Indris looked as if all was lost as he whispered, "Yes, my lord." Cologne then made a sign to Tayo's parents, and they both slowly rose, stretched themselves to their full height, and approached the young priest with a stealthy grace. Indris stood firm. They circled him widely at first, and then closed in until Rayan's huge mane was brushing against the blue sash of his robe. Suddenly, Tayo's mother sat down with a plop right at Indris' feet and licked his bare toes, purring loudly. There was a moment's pause, then Cologne beckoned Indris to stand down and motioned the two great beasts to return to their places. He then asked Talos to come forward and stand where Indris had stood, and Tayo suddenly realized that the high priest was calling her. "Come forth, my little one, and let us see what you have learned today." Tayo's fluffy little legs seemed to shake under her as she made her way towards the tall figure of the merchant, who looked so grand in his fine clothes and sparkling jewels. In fact, he spoke to the little lioness in a soft, kindly voice. "Hello, little girl," said Talos. "Let us be friends. Come, lick my hand." Tayo felt much braver after that. She was just about to give him a lick when she thought she noticed a slight movement behind him which startled her. Was she imagining it, or was there something there? She took a hard look at his aura, the same as she had done with Calonne and his lady, and although it was not a pretty color, it appeared clear enough. And yet it seemed to Tayo that things weren't quite as they should be. She shivered and growled, not at Talus himself, but at something behind him. She circled round him in the way her parents had shown her, and there it was, a small, sinister ball of evil energy. She took a deep breath and, half in anger and half in fear, let out the loudest roar her little lungs could muster, and Talus nearly jumped out of his skin. It was only the firm grip of her father's teeth on her small tail that prevented her from leaping at the dark intruder that only she, her family, and Calonne and Danu could see. Calonne's soothing voice spoke kindly in her ears. "Well done, little one. You have inherited both your parents' sight and wisdom. From now on, you will come to the temple regularly for training at the seat of judgment." Calonne's judgment was, of course, in favor of Indris. Talus was sent to the priests to be exorcised, which means that they would take away the nasty dark thing that Tayo had seen, and then give him healing and help. Calonne had also found out that Talus' daughter was very fond of Indris, so they were allowed to pursue their love with the blessing of the high priest. What a trying morning for a small lioness. Poor Tayo was quite exhausted, and as she walked beside her parents towards the big temple doors, her little legs felt weak. So weak, in fact, that she didn't jump when a silvery young voice spoke in her ear.
"Hello, little woolly one."
She turned and looked into the freckled face of young Halio. It was a friendly face, full of fun and frolic, but also warm and caring. Tayo liked what she saw, so she put her tongue out as far as it would go and gave the upturned nose a very wet lick.
"Oh, fie, you messy cub,"
gurgled Halio.
"If you and I are to be friends, then it must be two-sided."
And so saying, he threw his arms around the little lioness' neck, and the two of them toppled bumpity-bump down the temple's white steps. And that was the start of a friendship that was to survive not only the sun-drenched days of Atlantis, but colder, more cruel times when the justice of lions and humans would become confused in the dark mists of time. For Halio was none other than his sister Taku, who had taken on her first human body, just as Timble had foretold. When the Old Ones created all things, it was their wish that there should be harmony, love, and understanding among all living creatures. But there are unfriendly forces around the blue planet that do not want it to be that way, which is why things are as they are down here.